like it. Yep, it's mine.
The world got hooked on Made in China. The latest hit has been the shopping app Temu. Temu has been just founded back in September 2022, yet has become the most downloaded app just after months of existing. Temu lures customers with incredibly cheap prices and has been in the eye of many Western consumers after they ran a Super Bowl ad. Many might wonder how a brand new app can afford such low prices, yet sponsor an ad in the Super Bowl after just months of existing. Millions of products flow from China to the rest of the world for insanely low prices. The answer, how Chinese companies manage to do that, is complicated, but behind the shiny facade of digital shopping lies a darker side, which reaches far further than one could imagine, and its consequences impact all of us. Among the new shining star Temu, there are many different e-commerce companies from China selling their products like Taobao or AliExpress, JD, Douyin, Pinduoduo or Tmall. But if you think Temu is just some inexperienced newcomer taking over the world by storm, you're dead wrong. Despite being an American-based online marketplace, as they describe themselves, they are a subsidiary of PDD Holding, which also owns Pinduoduo. Pinduoduo has been in the e-commerce game for a while now in China, and they are massive. Another company recognized by most in the e-commerce space is Douyin, or more known as TikTok in the West. In China, you can buy products directly inside of Douyin or TikTok when clicking on a purchase button below the video, a feature TikTok is planning to roll out as well over time. While products are marketed through pictures or videos here, a whole different side exists in the Chinese e-commerce market, which is live commerce. Live commerce is when an e-commerce store is directly linked up with a live stream, which allows viewers to watch a creator live and shop at the same time. This is already a gigantic market in China itself and reached a gross merchandise value of over 400 billion in 2022 and continues to grow. Live commerce is not very popular in the West at the moment, but who knows, maybe this way of shopping is just around the corner as well. When deciding whether to buy a product or not, a main argument is always price. Of course, quality, looks and so on matter, but how could you resist a t-shirt or dress, which is just 1/10 of the price of something compared to a similar product in your local mom and pop shop? China exceeds at selling products to the West and shipping them around the entire world, while still having insanely low prices, often even without any shipping costs whatsoever. But how are these prices so insanely low? Let's start with the more obvious reasons first. China has a massive labor pool with over 1.4 billion inhabitants. While other countries struggle to recruit new workers for their factory, China has a seemingly endless stream of workers, often coming from the rural parts of China to the city and manufacturing hubs to find work, to feed their family. The price of wages is mostly determined by supply and demand. In the case of China, with many potential employees, this leads to fairly low wages, which in turn translates to cheaper product prices. At the same time, bad working conditions still exist, despite surely having improved over the past decades. The minimum wages continue to rise in China. However, whether minimum wages exist or not depends on the provinces. Shanghai, for example, has the highest minimum wages of 2,590 RMB, or about $400 per month. Along with the wages, health and safety norms are not as strict as in many developed nations. Enforcing safety measures, reducing waste, or disposing of toxic chemicals costs companies a ton of money. When those restrictions are not enforced harshly, many companies don't follow them, creating less costs for the companies themselves. China has been increasing its coal consumptions for many years and shows no signs of stopping. This is one of the reasons as to why power costs significantly less than in most European countries or the US. Xi Jinping instructed that based on China's national reality, coal's role would be hard to change in the short term. China pledged that they would peak their carbon emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. Coal is cheap energy, which gives advantages to the Chinese manufacturers, as they can pass on the lower costs of power to the consumers in the West. The Chinese yuan, the currency of China, has had a so-called currency peg since 1994 until 2005. This means the Chinese government artificially controlled the value of their currency and had a fixed exchange rate for the US dollar. They still keep a close eye on the value of the Chinese yuan. In their case, they sell a lot of yuan for other currencies like the US dollar. As China has such a strong export sector, their currency would normally appreciate as they export more than they import, therefore having a high demand for the Chinese yuan. However, their government is opposed to a strong yuan. This strategy keeps their currency cheap, meaning as a result, their companies stay competitive because they can keep selling their products for cheaper overseas. If their currency suddenly doubled in value, and assuming all other variables stayed the same, their products would have suddenly gotten twice as expensive for someone holding US dollar, for example. It is estimated that their currency is being kept undervalued by an estimated 30 to 40%. China has joined the World Trade Organization back in 2001. Since then, it has remained the status as a developing country. The World Trade Organization has no certain criteria for which countries are labeled as developed or developing. Rather, the countries which join themselves can decide if they are developing or developed. Being classified as a developing nation has multiple perks, for example lower rates for sending mail to a developed nation like the US. This is because the Universal Postal Union, which is based in Switzerland, coordinates rates and standards between nearly every national postal system in the world. The Universal Postal Union system has the arrangement that poor in developing countries pay lower rates than wealthier countries. This results in Chinese companies being able to ship packages or mail for just a fraction of what US or Western European countries could ship them for abroad. Many countries allege that China partakes in a strategy which is called dumping. Dumping is defined as the act of a manufacturer in one country exporting a product to another country at a price that is either below the price it charges in its home market or is below its cost of production. The goal of dumping is to capture the market or to destroy the competition for a particular product or commodity, so the price to the end user or consumer is lowered way below the competition, often even below cost. Dumping is one of the strategy China uses allegedly as a country which heavily encourages exports, while discouraging imports. The way they further heavily encourage exports is through subsidies. One such subsidy is the export tax rebate policy, which was initiated in 1985 by China as a way to boost the competitiveness of its exports by abolishing double taxation on exported goods. Double taxation can happen when a product of one country is sold to another country and that product is taxed in both countries. Exported goods from China were subject to 0% value-added tax, meaning they enjoy the value-added tax exemption or rebate policy. Additionally, customer products from China were exempted from any import taxes. These lower tax rates helped to keep the cost of production low, enabling the country to attract investors and companies looking to produce low-cost goods. Regarding taxes, individual income tax in China is quite an interesting topic, as individual income tax is not nearly so important for China's government as individual income tax is for other countries. Relatively few Chinese actually pay income taxes, just between 5 to 8% of its inhabitants. Most earn either too little or evade them by taking some of their income in cash. Salaried professionals have fewer options though. Many of those who pay taxes do so via WeChat or other apps. The Chinese government relies on other taxes. In 2018, individual income taxes amounted to just 8% of all tax revenues. China's value-added tax provided 46% of tax revenues and the corporate income tax accounted for 21%. A further reason for manufacturers being able to produce such cheap products are highly optimized and concentrated supply chains. One of the most famous examples is Shenzhen, the tech hardware hub of China, or the entire world in fact. Having an entire industry concentrated in a single location is highly beneficial for both consumers and suppliers. If you want to manufacture new headphones, you move to somewhere where individual components are manufactured This in turn then attracts even more of those suppliers supplying individual components. This way, entire towns can become highly specialized, whether they produce high-tech products, pharmaceuticals, or even zippers. What is also a factor relating to the entire supply chain are the so-called economies of scale. Economies of scale are the cost advantages a company gets from producing more of the same product. In simple terms, this means that the more you produce of a product, the cheaper a single unit becomes to produce. When you only want to produce one single unit, buying a machine to manufacture that unit isn't worth it, because producing just one unit would be incredibly expensive. However, when you manufacture hundreds, thousands, or even millions of units, the cost of large equipment is justifiable, and at the same time you can negotiate better rates with suppliers when buying in large bulks. Now, I don't want to get into any more specifics, as I will probably start to bore people, but to summarize, Chinese companies have been accused of receiving unfair subsidies and engaging in dumping for decades. There have been hundreds of cases which have been brought against China by the US and other countries alleging unfair support or anti-competitive practices, and many of those cases have been successful. The Chinese state itself provides an amazing amount of support to local Chinese producers. That can include free land, cheap capital, loans which one may not have to pay back if things go wrong, guaranteed government purchasing, and tax holidays. At the same time, regulations and other barriers keep some goods from abroad from competing in China. These subsidies allow producers to sell at cheaper prices outside of China. When industries from outside of China have to compete with Chinese companies, which get massive subsidies from the government and all the listed advantages before, it's hard or even impossible to compete. What many leaders abroad worry is that China is able to apply the same recipe, which is high volume and low cost production, to more high-end manufacturing and high-tech industries. All those measures have devastating effects on the economies of other countries. Numerous industries have ceased to exist due to Chinese products being significantly cheaper to import instead of producing them locally. This creates a large dependence on China for those products because the local industry has already died out. I want to point out that this video does not intend to shame Chinese customers or producers. In the end, consumers all over the world still opt to buy Chinese products, and as long as there is demand, there will be a supply. It is up to each one of you what you buy in your everyday lives, especially because consumers in the West also heavily profit from these cheap products manufactured in China. Many products which were considered luxury items decades ago have become very affordable thanks to the Chinese economy.